Let's turn to the advisory. And with more than 250,000 Australians will retire in the next year, that means super and advice is entering a new untested phase, shifting from accumulation to record super drawdowns. Aaron Minney is the head of retirement income research at Challenger and joins us now. Aaron, welcome back.
Yeah, hi Andrew, thanks for having me.
So 250,000 over the next year. In fact, you're looking at 2.5 million to retire over the next decade. That's a lot of withdrawals and not a lot of accumulation going on, you would have thought, in that period right there. What's the likely effect?
Yeah, it's a big change. You know, the whole system's built around accumulation and people building up their savings. But when you've got, 250,000 every year hitting retirement and needing to draw down, they've got to figure out how to do that and how to do that safely. And what you find is that this is where people really have a lot of confidence problems. The system hasn't set itself up well enough yet. We're starting to get there. So people don't know exactly what they're doing and they're worried about what's to come.
So you talk of three megatrends that are likely to disrupt the sector. The first one being regulatory pressure. In what sense?
Yeah, so a lot of regulatory pressure around, and it's really around retirement income. So when you talk about drawdowns, people have got this pot of money. How do they actually spend that and spend that safely? And for many people, you're looking at 20 to 30 years of having to spend money, but not knowing how to top it back up. So that's the first step. And there is, we've seen the covenant, we've seen pressure from APRA and ASIC on super funds to improve outcomes for members. But just looking beyond that a little bit, and this taps into when you talk to retirees about what they worry about, it's things like aged care. People don't understand aged care. There's a lot of confusion. Reports, we've got 3,000 people, probably growing by the day, trapped in hospital because there's not space. And so people don't understand what their aged care costs are going to be or how it sits together. And as we've got this older population, not everyone's going to need it, but a greater number of people are going to need aged care and help with financing it and paying for that as they get there. So that's sort of the second big trend.
Well, I mean, just on that fact, trying to find an aged care placement, as you say, is proving to be very difficult for thousands of Australians at the moment. You would anticipate that is going to increase dramatically over the next decade then, if you're talking about 2.5 million entering that retirement phase, and that gross undersupply of housing. I mean, that is a crisis right there, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I don't think we're quite at the crisis yet, but we're getting close. We're seeing, there's 250,000 people hitting retirement a few years before they get there. But when you've got 3,000 people not waiting, I think I saw somewhere today saying there's 200,000 people waiting for an aged care assessment. So that's a lot of people getting to the point. The government's throwing more money at that, increased funding, they've changed things in November. But there's scope there to find better solutions, both in terms of the care itself and how people manage those expenses as they get through that later stage of retirement.
And in terms of paying for aged care and placement, how are people doing that, particularly those that don't have property as an asset and relying purely then on retirement savings?
Yeah, well, the one thing about the Australian system is at the low end, there's government funding. So it goes back from a less of an issue around funding. It's like the age pension, you can get it, but it's not very much. So you don't have a lot of choice in what you've got. Where you want people who are looking for choice and finding maybe a better quality in terms of their lifestyle in the aged care facility, that's where it's becoming more of a challenge to find something and fund that. But it's split into three different components around sort of the accommodation, the care and the lifestyle, which, once someone understands those three components, and it's a whole lot of detail around getting on top of that, it makes it a bit easier.
And Aaron, further to that then, given so many are retiring, that leads us to the next mega trend, intergenerational wealth transfer.
That's right, and there's been reports, productivity commissions highlighted, $5 trillion worth of wealth that's sitting there that will probably pass on to the next generation. A lot of that's caught up in the family home. Some of those grandkids will be hoping they'll get a piece of that at some point. But it's something that, when you look at it as where the sort of the industry is at the moment, we're not really set up for that yet. We've got some stuff that's sort of starting to come through, but it's not something that is front of mind for a lot of people. They know they sort of want to leave something, but not so sure how, and sort of the easiest way to do that.
So given those emerging issues you've just discussed then, how is the advice industry and super industry responding to those challenges?
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing an increase in the number of specialist aged care advisors. So these are financial advisors that sort of focus on helping clients, often the children of the person who needs the aged care, because they're not all sort of focused on managing their affairs at that time there, how they do that and how they navigate that system. And there's a few other options that are opening up in that space. The government has increased funding, but like a lot of things, when they increase funding, the announcement comes before the plans, and we've got to build bits around that. So I think there's scope there to put better plans in place, better ways of people finding the right aged care facility near them, and programs out there that work at that as well.
So what are you doing there at Challenger then, as you see these radical shifts?
Yeah, one of the things we're seeing a lot, and it combines the aged care and the intergenerational, is one of the options around funding the aged care that works well with the means tested fees, something we call Care Plus, and it provides someone who's got a bit of a money left over from selling the home once they've gone into care, and to making sure they don't get penalised with the fees you have to pay, and still leave a little bit for the next generation there. So we're seeing increased interest from advisors in that, interest from clients, just to understand how to better to navigate that system.